friends, happy Monday. I hope everybody was able to enjoy a beautiful Palm Sunday yesterday, the start of Holy Week, because next Sunday is Easter. Today I'm going to share with you all of my resurrection eggs, but first I wanted to show you the progress on my grass. You won't believe it. Look at all that grass growing. It's going to start to get really high and it's going to look really, really cool. It's going to stay in my windowsill to keep growing though. Today I'm going to share with you our resurrection eggs. So we're going to open all of them back up except for that last one because I want to save that for tomorrow. So let's start with our number 1 egg. Does anybody remember what was in this egg? It's a donkey. And Jesus rode on this donkey into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. If you remember, all of the townspeople in Jerusalem were so excited that he was coming, and they were waving him with palm leaves because it was so hot in the desert, right? And they wanted to show him that they loved him and they were treating him like a king. And then in our number 2 egg, does anybody remember what was in here? We have a tiny fork, a tiny spoon, and a tiny knife. Now, if you remember, we use all of these things when we eat. Now, if you remember, Jesus went to Jerusalem and he was meeting all of his special friends there, his disciples, and he was meeting them there and they were going to have a special dinner. They were going to have one last meal together, and that was called the Last Supper because Jesus knew that it was the last time that he was going to have dinner with all of his friends together. Does anybody remember what was in number 3? In number 3 are 3 dimes, 3 silver coins. And who remembers who got all of these coins? It was Jesus's friend Judas, remember? And he was very greedy, and he knew someone or some people that wanted to get rid of Jesus. Remember, the kings wanted to get rid of Jesus. Do you remember why? Because they were jealous of Jesus. So Judas said, I know where he's sleeping. I can give him to you if you pay me. So Judas was very greedy, and he got money for telling the kings where Jesus was. Now, if you remember, some of our eggs are pretty sad, right? So we know that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 are pretty sad. So a lot of them are kind of sad. And we remember that Jesus knew this was going to happen. And he said, don't be afraid, right? So if you remember what is in number 4, it doesn't make any noise when I shake it. Number 4 is that purple cloth. If you remember, that purple cloth was given to Jesus to wear after they took all of his clothes from him. They took them and they gave him that purple robe because you remember that purple is a color of royalty. Way back when Jesus was alive, a long time ago, purple was the color of royalty. So like kings and queens and royalty wore purple. And so the kings gave him a purple robe to make fun of him because all the other people that loved Jesus, they thought he was a king and they were treating him like a king, but all of the kings didn't like that. They were jealous of Jesus, that they all liked him better. So they gave him a purple robe to make fun of him. It's kind of hard to understand, but they made fun of him by giving him that color, purple. Does anybody remember what was in this egg, number 5? Number 5 was our crown of thorns. Remember, we talked about thorns. Roses have thorns. Sometimes there's thorn bushes in the woods. Thorns are pokey, and if you touched one with your finger, you would start to bleed. So another way that they made fun of Jesus was by giving him a crown. Now, kings and queens have crowns that are beautiful and that are made out of gold and silver and jewels and beautiful colors. Now, Jesus's crown that they gave him to make fun of him was made out of thorns to hurt him on purpose. So they put it on his head, and that's when he started to bleed. So this was just another way to hurt him and to make fun of him because they didn't think that he was royalty. They didn't think that he was, but they were giving him things to make fun of him so that people would laugh at him. Now, we didn't get to open up this next egg together. So I don't know if your moms and dads have told you what was in number 6, but we're going to go over it together right now. So number 6 doesn't really make any noise when I shake it. Number 6 is a piece of string, because after they took Jesus's clothes and after they gave him the purple robe and after they gave him the crown of thorns, they used a whip to whip his back. So they hurt him. They hurt him with a whip on his back, and he was hurting even more. So he had the crown of thorns on his head, and then they whipped his back to hurt him even more. So his back was bleeding and he was tired, and they whipped him with this whip, and some of them even tied rocks at the end, and they whipped him with that too. So do you think Jesus was probably hurting at this point? He was probably hurting physically. His body was probably hurting, but he was probably also hurting mentally and emotionally, and he was probably sad, and he was probably wanting to get out of this, but he knew that at the end of this story was going to be happy. So he knew that he was doing this for a reason, and that it was going to be okay at the end. Number 7 is a cross. Now this is probably one of the most important eggs that I'm going to open, because the cross, we see crosses everywhere. You might have one in your house. If it has Jesus on it, it's called a crucifix. So you might have a cross in your house. You might have one in your room. You might see one at church. Well, of course, we'll see one at church, but you might see them in different places. But we know that this cross is a symbol for us to remember Jesus, right? Now, the story behind this cross, it's pretty sad. So the bad guys that were wanting to hurt Jesus, they forced him, after they whipped him, they forced him to carry a huge cross up a big giant hill. So the cross was made out of heavy wood, and they made him carry it on his back, and they made him walk up a big giant hill. And because it was so heavy, he fell 3 times. So he fell from how heavy the cross was, and he was tired, he was hungry, he was hot, because they were in the desert where it's hot, and he hadn't eaten, he hadn't drank any water. So he was really tired from carrying that cross all the way up a huge hill, and he fell 3 times. It's kind of like if your mom or dad ask you to carry in some groceries from the car, and it might be full of milk or orange juice or things that are heavy, and you're like, oh, I can't carry this, it's too heavy, and you might have to put it down. But the bad guys, they didn't let Jesus put it down. He had to carry it all the way up the hill, and he fell 3 times. Number 8 is probably one of the saddest eggs. Number 8 is a nail. Now, if you've ever really taken a look at the crosses or the crucifixes in church where you see Jesus, you see him on the cross. And if you look at his hands, his palms, and down on his feet, you'll see that the bad guys, they nailed Jesus to the cross. So they put his arms out like this, and then they crossed his feet together like this, and they put a nail in the middle of his feet so that he was attached to the cross, and then they put nails in the middle of his palms so that his arms were attached to the cross. Now, the saddest part about this is that when Jesus walked up the hill with that big cross that was on his back that he fell 3 times, when he walked up there, he was walking up there with 2 other people, and those people were criminals. So they had done really bad things. They had maybe stolen something from somebody. They had maybe done something even worse. I don't know. But they were criminals. And we know that Jesus was not a criminal. Jesus didn't do anything bad. Jesus was a kind and generous and giving person. So the saddest part is that Jesus went up there on that hill, and he was nailed to a cross in between 2 people who were criminals. And Jesus was not. That's probably one of the saddest parts, is that they were treating him like he was a criminal, and they were putting him on a cross with 2 other people who did do bad things, and Jesus didn't do anything bad. Number 9 is a sponge. So this is like a sponge, like moms and dads might use this to wash dishes. It holds water and it can get soapy. But the sponge represents somebody that was there watching. So there were a lot of people there that were watching this happen. They were really sad. So there was somebody there that was watching this happen, and they watched Jesus get nailed to the cross, and they were so sad, and they wanted to do something to help him. So what they did was they tied a sponge to the end of a really long stick, and they dipped the sponge, the end of the stick where the sponge was, they dipped that into a special liquid that they wanted Jesus to drink from. So they dipped it in the liquid, and then they held the stick up to Jesus, who was on the cross. So he was up high. That's why they needed a stick. And they offered him this liquid. It was kind of like medicine. So they wanted him to take a drink of it so that he wouldn't feel any of the pain from the crown of thorns or from the nails in his hands and his feet. They wanted him to feel better. So they wanted to give him this medicine, and they wanted him to drink from the sponge. And he said no, because he wanted everybody to know that he was taking this pain on for everybody else. He knew everything was going to be okay, and he said no thank you probably. He said no, he wanted to feel everything so that we could all not feel pain at the end of this. Isn't that amazing? So Jesus said no to the medicine that was going to make him feel better. And then number 10 is a piece of paper, and it says, "This is the King of the Jews." Now, this was another way that the kings and the bad guys were making fun of Jesus. So when Jesus was on the cross, they put a sign above his head, to kind of like a label, like when we label pictures, like if you drew a picture of a flower and you labeled it at the top and you wrote flower, you're labeling your picture. The bad guys and the kings were labeling Jesus, the person who was on the cross, and they wrote, "This is the King of the Jews." Now, did they really think he was a king? No, they didn't think he was a king, but they were also making fun of him by calling him a king and being rude and unkind and calling him the King of the Jews. So this was another way that they were making fun of him and mocking him. Now, number 11 is the last one that I'm going to open today, because tomorrow I'm going to open up the last one. And remember, the end of our story is very happy. Even though we've had some sadness in our story, we know that at the end, in number 12, that this is going to be a happy ending, right? So number 11, I'm going to shake it for you. Number 11 is a rock. Okay, so after Jesus died on the cross, and we know that because we hear that in church and we talk about it occasionally. We know that he died, but he died for us. So on Good Friday is actually when Jesus passed away. So on Friday this coming week is the day that we call Good Friday, and we know that that is the day that Jesus took his last breath on the cross and he passed away. And what they did was they took him, the people that loved him, his friends, they took him down off of the cross to be respectful after he had passed away. They took him down off the cross and they carried him very carefully. They covered him up with a sheet to be respectful, and they carried him to a special place called a tomb. Now, a tomb is kind of like a bear's den or like a cave. It's basically just like a big giant hill that has a hole inside of it, or like a bear could live, like a den or a cave, like I said. So they decided to take him to that special place, and they laid his body there to rest, and they laid the strips of cloth over him so that to be respectful. And what they did is they didn't want anybody to mess with him. They didn't want anybody to touch him. They wanted him to be left alone and left in peace. So what they did was they rolled a big giant rock in front of the hole to the den or the cave. And they rolled a big giant rock so that nobody could get in it and nobody could get out of it, and they wanted it to be left alone. So they rolled a big giant rock in front so that they could lay Jesus to rest in there. Now, that's the part of my story where I'm going to stop. okay? But I wanted to show you a picture from the book, the very first Easter. I want to show you a page from this book. We've read all of the story up until the page I'm about to show you. So we know, so here's a picture of Jesus with his purple robe, and he's carrying the cross. And remember, he carried it up a huge hill and he fell 3 times. Look at his face. He looks tired, right? And then I want to show you, here is a picture. This is Mary, actually, his mom. And she is sad because she knows that Jesus has passed away on that cross. And then I want to show you this picture. If you notice, you see 3 crosses up there. Like I said, Jesus was hung on the cross in the middle, and then there were 2 robbers on either side of him. And that was really sad because Jesus had never done anything wrong. And all the people are sad because they know that Jesus has passed away. And then here's a picture. I'm not going to tell you exactly what's happening in here, but you'll learn about that tomorrow. Here's a picture of the cave or the tomb and the big rock that they had rolled in front of it. And here's a picture, another picture of the tomb. There were guards that were watching the tomb to make sure that nobody messed with it. So tomorrow I'm going to open up number 12, okay? So this is the happy part of our story. So I'm going to open up number 12 tomorrow, and you're going to learn a little bit more about what happens at the end of our story. And make sure you talk to moms and dads about maybe how all of the sad eggs made you feel. Like, we know that Jesus died on the cross because when we see the crucifixes at church, we see him with blood and we see him hanging on the cross. But we know that he did it for us, and he told us, right? Don't be afraid. So this week, I want you to talk to moms and dads, maybe your brothers and sisters, about how you might be feeling about this story of Easter. It's sad, but we know at the end, it's going to be very happy. So it's okay for us to be sad. It's okay for us to feel these feelings, but we know that in the end, it's going to be very happy. So I hope that you guys enjoyed listening to all of our resurrection eggs. And we are going to learn tomorrow about what's in number 12. I know you guys are excited. We're just going to have to be patient and wait. And you guys will get another video from me tomorrow. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I can't wait to see you guys again tomorrow. Bye, friends.